"May I ask what you're doing, sir?" said the man to my left, just outside my car window. "Yes, you can," I replied. "Ask? That's not exactly what I meant," the voice said. "I want to know what you're doing." Of course, I noticed, and was well aware that the person asking was wearing the uniform of a city cop. I wasn't so drunk that I didn't realize that fact. I was feeling pretty good by this point. The reason for my flippant response was that I just didn't care about anything right now, especially stupid questions, no matter who was asking them. I'm sitting here enjoying the moonlight reflecting in the lake, sipping my single cask selected whiskey. "It's a soothing sight," I replied. "I don't like to be pretentious, but I like the flavor of this particular whiskey. I spent the extra money to buy it, and I intend to enjoy it. And if I may say so, it's a little better than the blended variety on offer. At least this time. And something about the moonlight is soothing." "Sir, are you drunk?" a voice asked. "Almost," I replied. "I hope to be there soon. In fact, I'm hoping to kill a few brain cells tonight. I'd like to destroy a few million suckers who tell me I love this bitch I'm married to. At the very least, I'd like to get to the point where I can get rid of her without much remorse." "Okay, we can get to that in a minute," the voice said. "You do realize that driving while intoxicated is a felony?" "Yes, sir, I do," I replied. "But I would like to point out that I am not driving the vehicle. I am just sitting in it, drinking and getting drunk. This vehicle is equipped to not operate, or at least not move if the driver is intoxicated. The driver must enter a 4-digit PIN and blow into this device." I pointed to the straw above the ignition switch. "Any alcohol content in excess of 3/4 of the legal limit renders the vehicle inoperable. I am definitely not fit to drive this vehicle." The voice pointed to the interior lights on and the radio, or at least the audio system. "Yep, everything works," I said. "I want to be able to see well enough not to spill whiskey. I can listen to music if I want, but right now I just need a little background noise. It's cool enough in here that I don't need air conditioning." I would also like to point out that while the engine can automatically turn on from time to time to recharge the battery, the car cannot be put in gear and driven, added I. "So, care to explain why you're sitting here in the city park drinking?" a voice suggested. I looked at it carefully. "Well, sir," I offered, "I needed a place to sit and gather my thoughts. The house doesn't lend itself to that at the moment." I wondered how he would react to my changed manner of speech. "You don't need to call me, sir. Officer will suffice. Or you can call me by my first name, Gary," he said. "May I see your driver's license?" I held them out to him, and he handed them to his partner. I'm sure he'd already run the license plate number, so he knew it belonged to me. Maybe he was just checking to see who was using the car. I almost laughed out loud. I could understand some of the politically correct bullshit that society fed us, but for cops to call themselves by their first name in a nonviolent encounter? This guy seemed unfazed. "Well, instead of calling you sir of 3 syllables, I decided to shorten it and call you sir," said I. He gave me a hard look and then grinned. "You're not that drunk, are you?" he asked. He could tell I was just playing smart. "Oh yeah, I'm that drunk anyway," I replied. "It's just that I'm not that stupid and I can hold my own. At least not right now. I really don't care if I'm too drunk to handle it." I saw the cop's partner step back to give me my license back. They clearly weren't going to leave, but they didn't order me out of the car either. I wondered about that. They stood hunched over and watched me, feeling uncomfortable. Both declined my offers of a drink or to sit in my car where they could relax. Their sergeant arrived and talked to them. I guess later that they had quickly established my identity when the first officer returned, walked around the car, and sat in the passenger seat. "How about we have a little chat, Mr. Jacobs?" I liked the young man. I told him that the last Mr. Jacobs I knew was my father. My name was John. He smiled and nodded. He then asked if I needed to call someone. I shook my head and said no, not unless I was forbidden to continue drinking, in which case he could call my lawyer. "You are allowed to drink alcoholic beverages in the park until 2 in the morning, he said. "Then I'll sit here until I'm ready to leave and either call an Uber or have my daughter come get me. I'll need to talk to her either way. By the way, why did you decide to sit with me?" "I got special permission. I'm not sure exactly why. The sergeant told me to sit with you and talk," he offered. "Why? What do you know about me?" I asked. "No big deal. It all started with a simple man drinking in a car in the park call. As soon as we identified you, I was told to sit down and start talking, and here I am. I have no idea what that means. My sergeant said I could have one drink if the situation called for it. He'll sign it. That fact alone makes me think there's more to the story. But I'm still not going to drink beer or whiskey. Have you got any soda or water?" The young policeman said. "It's whiskey from the same cask. It's almost sacrilege to dilute it," I exclaimed with a smirk. "But there might be a soda in the refrigerator behind your chair that you might like." I like to have something caffeinated every now and then, so I have some in stock. He reached back to open the built-in refrigerator. What kind of car is this? From the outside, it looks like a regular little hybrid, but everything about it is high-tech. This is no ordinary car, he asked. Who are you? I ignored the young policeman's obvious confusion and changed the subject by asking, are you married? He shook his head. Well, I'll be married for a while yet. Have you ever thought about marriage, or rather the sanctity of marriage? Fidelity versus infidelity? Well, yes, Gary offered hesitantly. I would expect my wife not to have fun with anyone, and I certainly wouldn't. I had a girlfriend who thought that since we weren't married, she could have sex with whoever she wanted. We are no longer together once I caught her with a guy in our apartment. I asked him what he had done. I almost did enough to get kicked off the police force. I showed him my service weapon. When I got home, he was already entertaining her. If I had known it was being recorded, I might have punched him, but I never would have pulled my weapon. I laughed and held out my fist for a punch. He grinned back. Sure, he begged, cried, almost shit himself, and then tried to file a complaint. They took him aside and told him he'd have a hard time if he pursued anything, and he couldn't even walk down the street without having to show his ID every block or two. And if he spit on the sidewalk, he would be arrested. He figured it out and left town. I, of course, got a letter of reprimand anyway. It was a complete gift, and only because a senior officer had gotten into a similar situation a few months before and was covered up. Well, that's a better story than mine, I admitted. I would have loved to catch the bastard while he was entertaining my wife. Maybe I would have pulled the trigger, even if the bastard was half my size and a dozen years younger. Gary looked at me. Okay, I take it your wife is cheating and you know who it is. I nodded. The guy was perceptive. You didn't catch them in the act? I shook my head. My wife Donna said the dumb line to me. We need to talk. She didn't even say darling. I have no more respect than Rodney Dangerfield, I said. I came home after a long day at work, and there was my wife and sister-in-law waiting for me with a couple small suitcases. I walked through the door and was ambushed. Shit, Gary exclaimed. What happened? They tell me I'm a worthless bastard, I said, taking a sip of whiskey. Well, not in those terms. My wife says she's found someone more exciting, more suited to her needs than me. Doris, her sister, sits back and smirks, listening to me. I ask her what she is talking about, and she replies that she has found a real man who puts her needs before his own and makes her feel like a real woman, I said. Her sister nods like one of those little dogs you see on the back window of a car. And then the bitch, sister-in-law, says he has enough money to support her the way she deserves. So no arguments or talk of divorce. You better get over it, and let her have fun with no nonsense. She went on to tell me that this guy was man enough to handle both of them and rock their boats. So apparently both women are whores to this guy. That's what hurts? Not the she was cheating part. I didn't even have time to fully realize that part. It was that I hadn't filled her needs or made her feel like a woman. Oddly enough, that was exactly what my first thought was. Plus I couldn't or wouldn't support her. I have to admit I was confused. Donna has never complained about our sex life before, so I know I'm adequate and good to her in that regard, but I was clearly wrong about supporting her lifestyle. Do you think I modified this car to avoid getting a DUI? I built it because my brother-in-law was a chronic drunk and I was trying to protect his ass. To fulfill his duty as a member of the extended family, he had to enter a PIN number and blow into an analyzer before getting behind the wheel after drinking. I always suspected the reason he drank so much was because of his bitch of a wife. He was a nice guy and stayed with her because of his kids, even though they were grown. One night this idiot couldn't start his car and agreed to give one of his drunk friends a ride and both of them died. I took the car back. Let's get back to your wife, Mr. Jacobs, the young policeman said patiently. I asked him to call me John. All right, John. Tell me about the time you met your wife. I grinned. You're writing this down, aren't you? I still can't figure out why you're sitting here with me. Do you have a degree in psychology or something? Is it one of those newfangled, woke interventions? I asked, taking a sip. Not that I care. I'm going to sit here and drink until you arrest me, or I have to pee. Oh, I get it. You'll wait until I come out and arrest me for either public intoxication or urinating in a public place. Gary shook his head. No, neither of those things is anything more than a minor fine. One of my bosses made the decision that I should sit here with you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. My degree is in engineering. I went to school through the ROTC program, and after college, I served 4 years in the Army. After I got discharged, I needed a job and the police department was just hiring. So 2 years later, I'm here. An engineer. Huh? I said. Well, maybe later I'll show you how this machine works. You might enjoy the tour. Anyway, back to my story. My wife Donna told me I was worthless shit. Not exactly her words, but the meaning is the same. Her sister agrees. They picked up their small suitcases and laughing, headed out the door. My wife says she'll be home Sunday afternoon or evening, and we'll talk things over. It's unlikely I'll be there. I muttered. I have a daughter who just graduated from college, and I need to call her. But I'm a little scared. She's at such a vulnerable age right now, trying to start a career and maybe a social life. Living on her own for the first time. How am I going to tell her that her mom is a cheating whore? Worse, what if she already knew and was afraid to tell me? Even worse, what if she knew and condoned my wife's cheating? I wouldn't survive such a betrayal. I began to shake. I almost fainted. Hey kid, Gary said sharply to bring me out of my reverie. I mean John, Mr. Jacobs. He paused to regroup. Let's deal with this in order. You haven't spoken to your daughter, have you? I nodded and then shook my head, not knowing how to answer. Tell me about her, said Gary. I relaxed a little. I love my daughter. She came along just a year after my wife and I got married. We got married when we were both still in college. My wife said no more kids, so that's it. One child, regardless of my wishes. I know what you're thinking, but yes, my daughter is mine. She even looks like me, or rather other women on my side of the family. Thank God she's not as ugly as me. Gary laughed and I was relieved. She's smart as a whip and decided to study computers instead of engineering, even though she has aptitude. Maybe you should call her right now, Gary suggested. I mewled and shook my head. He shrugged. But I realized he wasn't going to let it go unchallenged. Later. Maybe. I agreed, not thrilled with the idea. I don't want to leave my car here, and I'll need a ride. I need to work that out. I'm just not ready to drive. That's part of what I'm thinking about. I'm making plans on how I'm going to proceed. If you keep drinking that whiskey, you won't remember any of these plans anyway, suggested Gary. Of course I will. I said. I have a tape recorder. I take notes. I'm sorry. I should have told you that our conversation is automatically recorded. I just assumed you had your camera on. I expect everything I say to be recorded. So do you know who your wife is dating? Asked Gary. I nodded my head. At that time, he got a call on his radio. He walked away from my car. A few moments later, he came back. Mr. Jacobs, what do you do at Async Robotics? He asked. I shrugged and said I was an engineer. Gary smiled. More to the point, a very high-ranking engineer, right? I nodded. This isn't just a sit-down and talk thing anymore. My captain said you're the man who designed some of their advanced prosthetics. He was just on the line. He said you're the reason his daughter is walking again. You developed a prototype prosthetic limb. They help existing limbs function properly. That answers the question of why I'm sitting here talking to you. He personally asked me to give you the latest news. I shrugged. He's obviously interested in you. Please, sir, Mr. Jacobs, don't screw this up for me. I could tell he should have kept some of what he said to himself. I wondered how Eddie knew I had been contacted by his officers. I suspected that he had flagged my name so that he would be informed immediately of anything that concerned me. It wasn't exactly legal in my opinion, but it was nice that he cared about me. I'd known Eddie since junior high school. His teenage daughter had suffered a boating accident 2 years earlier and lost the use of her right leg. He gladly allowed me to use his daughter as a test subject for one of my prototypes, and now his daughter is back on her feet and walking. Eddie and I have remained close, and I was happy to help. I'd like to take you home, sir, said Gary. I resolutely declined. How about I take you to a hotel? You'll sleep it off and then approach tomorrow with fresh perspectives. Really? You think I'm going to look at the world better tomorrow than I do today? Snapped at me. No. I said fresh perspectives. It means clear head, Gary explained. Making decisions rationally and not clouded by alcohol. I said I liked alcohol and wasn't ready to go anywhere yet. He shrugged. He tried to distract me a bit by asking me about the prosthetics I was developing. I told him that it was just one of our divisions. We had several ongoing projects. We were also working on features that would allow us to create self-driving cars. I could see that he was visibly interested in some of the technical aspects. He asked what other projects were being developed. We launched a line of voice-controlled robots to improve the lives of paraplegics, to give them some independence in their daily lives. For example, voice-controlled motorized wheelchairs. Some of our devices can do more than that. We've even worked on robotic arms that could lift objects and even help the user eat. We worked on a robot that could wipe a guy's butt. We had a little hiccup when one of our testers got excited and yelled. Well, humor me right now. I squinted to see how intently Gary was listening. He stared at me for a second and then burst out laughing. I realized that he had a sense of humor too, just like me. Tell me why you wanted to become a police officer, I asked. You seem to have the technical aptitude and the proper credentials. Why didn't you apply to Async Robotics? Yes, they weren't hiring. I got a letter saying they would keep my resume on file, Gary said. I realized it was a cop-out and my resume ended up in a round file. And I needed a decent paying job locally. My mom needed financial help and my sister is in college. So it's just the way it is. I wasn't so drunk that I couldn't see this guy's potential. Send me your resume directly and stop by and see me in a few days. I have a few obvious personal issues to work out first, but I'll see what I can do. That's if you're still interested in that kind of career. He muttered a thank you, then took a deep breath and went back to the task at hand. He wasn't going to allow himself to be distracted and bribed. How did you get the name of the guy your wife is dating? He asked. I followed my wife and her sister to the Marriott. No one pays attention to such a small hybrid sedan. I watched them as they met the guy in the lobby. That was all it took. The guy hugged and kissed both my soon-to-be ex-wife and my sister-in-law. Gary looked at me suspiciously. He hadn't stated the obvious, that I had to know this man, and I did. Yeah, I know the creep. A smarmy asshole. I'm wondering if he's deliberately determined to cheat me or just playing games. But he's certainly not a rich man who can provide my wife with a better life like she thinks. I guess you make a pretty good living, Mr. Jacobs, John, said Gary. I mean, if you are a senior engineer, after all. Well, I suppose you're quite an older man, judging by your age and the way you talk about work. I wonder why your wife thinks she needs more money. Or did she just say that to bother you? Ah, you're wondering if Donna is just a bitch. She's a money-hungry bitch who's thinking about switching, said I. Probably both. We have a pretty active sex life. A couple times a week. I'm only 45, and I'm not slowing down too much in that regard. At least, I don't think so. My wife might argue with that, but she seems fine with it. We seemed compatible. I think she's just getting nervous. And talking to her bitch's sister probably gave her those thoughts. My sister-in-law is one of those compulsive personalities. She gambles and wins a few $100. You know, hits a little jackpot. Next thing you know, she loses it all back and heads to the ATM for more money. She'll say she hit the jackpot once, so it's bound to happen again. By the end of the night, she is drunk as hell and out of money. She has a decent job that should be enough to live on, but she is always broke and barely able to pay the bills, even though her kids are grown and out of the house. My wife seems to bail her out all the time, and it has become a point of contention. I think she tosses her sister money a lot. In fact, I'm pretty sure she does. I usually try to keep quiet about it. After my brother-in-law died, Doris started seeing different men. I stayed out of it too. I think money is a big part of the problem with my wife. I don't bring home enough money for her. She works as a school administrator, so we have a dual income. We live well, we have a modest but very nice house, and I paid for my daughter's college tuition so she can avoid student loans. At least once a week, we go out to eat at a nice restaurant. We travel a couple times a year, and she sometimes buys jewelry, especially when we go on cruises. But she wants more. More fancy cars, even though ours are only a couple years old. She got mad when I bought this car for my sister-in-law in exchange for one of our mortgages. She said a simple hybrid was beneath us, even though this car was geared far beyond simple. She drives a small sports coupe but wants more. She argues that I should go and demand a pay raise. I know I can get it, but she'll just spend the extra or give it to her sister and we'll be back to square one. I didn't bother to add that my brother has a nicer house, or at least a bigger house than mine, and he also has more kids. I told Donna years ago that we didn't need a big house with lots of useless, unfilled bedrooms. She never budged on the no more kids issue. I don't mean to be an ass, but it sounds like your wife is unhappy that you don't insist on a pay raise. It seems to her that you have to demand it, even though you think your lifestyle is good. She thinks all you have to do is ask and you'll refuse, suggested Gary. Well, part of it has to do with my brother being my boss, I said. Gary looked at me in confusion. Yes, Bob is the CEO and general manager. The thing is, we make the same income, which my wife also knows. She just thinks we both underestimate ourselves. I didn't want to reveal the rest of the story. Not then, and not to a man I didn't know well, and who had heard more about my personal life than he should have. Bob and I not only worked at a sink, but we owned it, or rather, our trust owned the controlling interest. We set the income level to be comfortable, but not excessive. My older brother Bob was also an engineer, but he liked the business side and got an MBA, and when he graduated, he started a small firm making computerized control units for various electronics. We used money from our inheritance, which was locked up in a trust. The trust paid for both of us to go to college. Of course, Bob hired me before I even graduated from university. The company paid me while I went back to school to get my college degree. I was married with a child at the time, so my wife was happy for the money. We just never communicated how the company infrastructure worked. Our families just assumed we were in leadership positions because we had been with the company since its inception. We hired talent to keep the company running, even though for many years HR hired most of the employees. The trust protected the company, but all of our individual assets were subject to community property laws. That's what I was thinking when Gary and his partner knocked on my window. So your wife thinks you're too soft-hearted to go along with your brother and demand to be paid what you're worth, suggested Gary. I nodded. He didn't talk about it or ask, but I could tell he was wondering if I was a wimp. Maybe in my wife's eyes I was, but I was happy with my job and my current lifestyle. We could have had an even better life if she hadn't spent our money on her sister. So have you made any decisions yet? He asked. I answered him that I was going to get a divorce. I wasn't going to put up with disrespect. 24 years of marriage be damned. I think you need to talk to your daughter. You may be afraid of her reaction, but you need to hear it, he suggested. I reluctantly nodded. Then he offered to drive me home, and when I flinched he said, well, your wife won't be there, but I can understand why you wouldn't want to stay there. You know, to be perceived as a rejected husband waiting for his wife to come home. I raised my middle finger. He shrugged and smiled, realizing he was getting a backlash. If it were me, I'd pack up my wife's things and try to stake out my territory. But if things work out like one of my coworkers, your wife will just move back in. I'd at least secure some personal effects. Change the combination on the safe, if you have one. Gather some important papers. Just no traveling today. I thought about it, I admitted. I just didn't want to risk him getting mad and starting to smash everything around. Or maybe burn everything to the ground. I've been fantasizing about that. The house is paid for, and I don't think it would be a crime if I didn't take out insurance. Gary shook his head. Getting drunk and staying in a hotel is certainly cheaper than letting anger override common sense and losing your temper. You probably won't be arrested for arson, but your wife could still sue you for destroying her stuff even if she doesn't press vandalism charges. Besides, she owns half of it all. It's not worth the risk. He frowned. Even the fact that my girlfriend cheated on me wasn't a reason to kick her out of the house. Not legally. Since she was already living there and considered her home, she could stay. We have stupid laws about evicting people. I asked him how he'd handled it. She stayed in the apartment, but that didn't mean I had to stay with her. So I moved all my stuff out, and I mean all my stuff. The furniture was mine. So when I was done, all that was left was her clothes hanging in the closet. And what was in the dresser was neatly stacked on the floor. Her toiletries were still in the bathroom, and her computer and all her books and stuff were on the floor. I left food in the fridge because she had bought some of it, but no cup or plate to eat out of, no pot to cook in. My buddies helped, so they all witnessed that nothing was destroyed or ruined. I had to laugh, or cry at the thought that this part of my life was over. My marriage was over. I just couldn't let Donna treat me like that. When Gary once again suggested I call my daughter, I agreed. I first asked him to drive me to the drugstore to buy a toothbrush and then to the hotel. I stipulated that it would not be a Marriott. As soon as I checked into the hotel, I called my daughter. Gary called one of his coworkers to pick him up, and after we exchanged phone numbers, he left. Daddy, why are you at the hotel? My daughter June immediately asked. Did something happen between you and Mom? I told her I would prefer to talk to her in person if she was free. Hell yeah, I'm free. I'm off to dinner with friends, but I'm always available to help you. I'll be there as soon as I can. As I hung up, I realized I forgot to tell her not to call her mother before we talked. But then I decided I didn't care if she did. What's going on? Asked June as soon as I opened the door to my room. She frowned, looking at my half-drunk state. The fact that you're drunk means Mom did something. I think whatever she did was stupid and hurtful. She's not stupid enough to try to kick you out. You would have burrowed into the ground. She left you, didn't she? She's gone to Aunt Doris's. I asked how she knew that. I drove by the house, but I didn't stop. Aunt Doris's car is in the driveway, but on one side, in front of your part of the garage. I can't tell if Mom's car was there, said June. Oh shit. Did they leave together for a party or worse? June asked the last word, moving closer to see my reaction. I nodded. Shit, she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around me and clinging to me, crying. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I couldn't help myself and began to sob. Despite the anger and resentment my wife had left in me, I knew my little girl was on my side. I loved her, but I can't put up with this. 24 years wasted, lamented I. Not the bottom. Just a new beginning, Daddy. You have me, proclaimed June as we hugged. I was glad she didn't immediately protest and tell me I needed to forgive. Finally, I had to ask, did you know about this? Warn me in advance? She shook her head and hesitated before continuing. Well, I suspected something was wrong. She and Aunt Doris have been spending a lot of time together. Surely you've noticed that, suggested June. I agreed. She even stayed overnight at her sister's house sometimes. The light bulb came on. June continued. Well, Doris has a lot of fun. I mean, going to bars and dancing and stuff like that. She didn't talk about it explicitly, but I'm sure she slept around. She'd see some guy and comment that he had a cute ass. That sort of thing. Mom said she wished she could do that. Then she'd quickly add something like, but I'm married. And sometimes she complained that you could make more money. All you had to do was go and ask for a raise. June blushed. I don't like to say this, but Mom did a few times. If your daddy had grown balls, he could have gone and demanded to be paid what he was worth. For goodness sake, he can't even stand up to his own brother. I shrugged and said we had enough money to live well if Donna didn't spend it. Oh, I know. I've seen her spend money. Especially after you wouldn't let me. You gave me an allowance the whole time I was in school. That is, even after all my bills were paid. You told me to consider it my payment for studying and getting good grades. I had to live on that amount or do without it. I think you purposely limited me to that amount so that I would learn to budget, said June. She interrupted the conversation by looking in the minibar. I can't drink this rotgut straight. I need to mix it up. Do you want to pay for this minibar? Or do you want me to go down to the lobby and use the soda machine? I need a drink while you tell me what happened. The thought made me laugh. Even now she looked at me sparingly. She was my daughter. First of all, it's not rotgut. It's an expensive single-barrel whiskey. It cost me over $50 a bottle. But save that walk. We'll spend the money. Half of it will still go to your mother when we sort out the estate. That statement threw June off balance. So it's not something you're willing to forget and forgive? It's more than an argument about money, said June. I told her it was much more than that and laid it all out. I told her in detail how I had spent the time from the time I got home until she showed up, including watching her mother and aunt's actions in the lobby of the Marriott. A policeman sat with you in your car and then drove you here? She asked, flabbergasted. I nodded. He's a good guy, I said. Smart. He's going to succeed at whatever he does. He gave me some advice. Like not coming home and burning the house to the ground, or not throwing all my mom's shit out on the lawn for the neighbors to see. I'm not going to hide anything from anyone, though. She's made her decision. I've made mine. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to let everyone know what a cheating bitch she is. She might even like the publicity that it's on the menu and available. Maybe she's deluded enough to think like she can switch like she said she would. Or maybe she's trying to push some kind of agenda to get me to go along with her new decision to do what she wants. By that I mean she needs to know that she can't share the same guy with her sister. Not in the long run. The whole idea is just stupid. That's what she's saying. You've been sitting around thinking about all this while sitting in your car drinking? Asked June, mildly amused. I'm not as stupid as everyone thinks, I said. I can think the situation through. Your mother wasn't just suddenly seized by some impulse to become a whore. She and your aunt planned it. It must have been in preparation for some time. June nodded, listening. It used to bother me how much she could tell you. And if you were on board? That got a reaction. June stared at me with her mouth open. It turned into a grin, then softened. Tears appeared in her eyes. You can't believe I'd be part of some plan to screw you over, Daddy? I shook my head. I knew for a fact that she had no idea of her mother's intentions. Tonight, as I sat drinking, all sorts of thoughts crossed my mind. How it happened? What really happened? Who knows? I said. My thoughts were all sorts of different things. Well, I can tell you this, stated June. She may be my mother, but that won't stop me from telling her what a stupid bitch I think she is. She asked me what I was planning on doing in the near future. I told her what Gary had said about how he handled his girlfriend's cheating. He's no expert, but I have to applaud the way he handled the situation, I said. He was decisive, acted straightforward, but kept his cool. I hope to be just as cool-headed. But I can tell you there's no turning back. I just can't forgive this. This isn't some one-time drunken mistake that can be smoothed over with counseling. This was a deliberate decision to destroy me, to rub my nose in it. Your mother may try to tell me it was just sex, or she was just trying to get my attention. Well, if that's the case, she ruined it, June said. You've always been hard on me. Not that I couldn't get a lot out of you, but I knew when I was out of line. Your bottom lip would quiver slightly when you were angry, and you kind of slumped your shoulders back when your decision was final. That's when I realized the game was over. I guess this isn't the time to discuss how you're going to help me convince Uncle Bob to give me a job at eSync, asked June with a smirk. I knew she had applied and gotten a few offers, but they were all out of state. Now I'll have to stay close to home to support you. I laughed but felt much better. I wanted her to be her own person and do what benefited her. So I never pushed her to work for Bob and me. Of course, I would have been happy for her to come work in the family business. But now was not the time for big openings. We'll work it out, honey, was all I said. June and I sat and talked for several hours. After a few drinks, she was too drunk to drive. So we went to the lobby for a free toothbrush. She slept in the other double bed. I heard her get up a couple times to go to the bathroom. I woke up to the sound of the shower running. June appeared fully dressed. Her hair was damp. I need to stop by the house to change, and then I'm going to the house. You shower, check out, and meet me there. We need to start sorting things out, she ordered. No breakfast first, boss, I asked. She grinned at my sarcasm and sternly told me to get my ass up, shower, and go home to change, and then we talk about breakfast. I really didn't feel like going home alone. I figured I might just change my mind and dump some of Donna's shit in the front yard as a public statement and let her clean it back up herself. I took my time, and 2 hours later I pulled up to my house and found June in the bathroom. She was in June's car, parked in the driveway. There was a pickup truck parked outside that I had never seen before. Stepping inside, I found June having coffee with Gary, the officer we had met the night before. You were telling me how Gary, Officer Jensen was helpful. So I wrote down his phone number and called him this morning, offered June by way of explanation. This won't get you in trouble, I asked the young man. He shrugged and said he was off duty and it was his day off. He was sure his captain would be on board, and if not, he was considering a career change anyway. I want to change. Gary, can I have that car that's blocking my access to my garage towed? I asked. He grinned and said it was my house. So I called the tow company and asked them to remove the car. Whoever left it blocking my garage would have to pay towing fees and $40 a day for impound when they picked it up. June called a local firm that offered climate-controlled storage and made a reservation. It wasn't long before most of my clothes and any personal items I didn't want to risk were safely locked up. I even took my linens, towels, bed and dresser from the guest room, as well as my chair and big screen TV. I took the everyday dishes but left Donna her nice china. I didn't fail to clean out the wine cabinet, a small thing, but I wasn't going to leave any of it behind. We still had some time left. Daddy, you need to authorize a few things I did for you, like transferring half of your money. I used my savings account. It can all be done online, you know that, so I just acted like you. I called your investment broker this morning and told him you were in the process of getting a divorce and asked if you had to come in person or if he could block your account. He said this happens all the time, and he can do it. It is very easy to block it. It takes you and your mom together or a court order to unblock it. Are you okay with that? I nodded. She grinned. Good, because that's exactly what I did. I also canceled your credit cards. I claimed they were stolen, but before I did that, I paid off the balance from your bank account. All of your information was on your desk. I know you know better than to leave your book of PIN numbers and passwords behind. I asked what I should do with the money. Well, I left enough money for you to withdraw $400 in cash from the ATM. Plus, remember the credit card you gave me just for emergencies while I was in school? Well, you can use it. You and I are on that account. Damn, you're on top of things. Do you have a beef with your mother? Asked Gary. I felt like June's stare was going to make him burn to the ground. No, my mom screwed over my dad so she could mess around. If the situation was reversed and my dad was the one off the reservation, I'd do the same thing to help my mom. I try to be fair. I just won't let her ruin his life when she thinks about it. I have no doubt Mom will try to get the money out. I know my aunt. She will encourage my mom. And once they realize that Daddy's not going to bend over for them, they're going to start taking action. And hard. Before we left the house, the phone rang. It was Donna. Why the hell isn't my credit card working? She demanded. They said it was stolen. You asshole. You're offended that I found a real man and your boyish ego can't deal with it. Well, I'm standing in front of an ATM and on my way to the bank. I'm going to hit up everything I can to get every last dime I can before they close. You're not going to stop me from having a good time this weekend. I knew she would only be able to get about $2,000. June had transferred the rest. She'd have enough money to last her for a few weeks if she didn't spend it on tonight's party. I was willing to bet she'd be the one paying for everyone's fun. You've made your decision, Donna. I've made mine, I said quietly. I'm separating our lives in every way possible until I talk to a lawyer Monday morning. It's over between us. I hung up before she could answer. June and Gary heard this conversation. I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat. I knew I couldn't find an apartment, and I didn't want to stay in a hotel for the rest of the weekend. I called my brother, and asked if he could put me up for the weekend. What the hell did you do? Asked Bob. I replied that I hadn't done anything at all. Don't tell me Donna totally freaked out and dumped your sorry ass or kicked you out for no reason. I told him it was much worse than that. Well, the guest room is cleaned up. Get your ass in here if you don't want me to come get you. By the way, I hope you brought all the bottles of single-barrel whiskey. Don't leave any so Donna can pour it out. I told him that all the bottles were guarded or accounted for. One I'd already put through my liver and kidneys. Don't waste any more before you get here. I want you sober enough to explain what happened before you shit your pants. I told him I was taking June out to eat and would be there in a few hours. June smirked. She looked at Gary, who looked dumbfounded. My uncle and daddy break each other's balls all the time. I mentioned her tongue. I'm a big girl, daddy. I use more than that. Anyway, Gary, Uncle Bob and daddy have each other's backs. Their jokes don't mean anything. You can tell it's serious when the jokes are over. I bet their next conversation will be a frank one. After we ate, they followed me to my brother's house and then went about their business. My brother and I spent most of the weekend in long conversations. His wife, Evelyn, listened somewhat at first, and after muttering a few remarks like vain self-sufficient bitch, left us alone. I wondered when I would hear from Donna next. She didn't call me when she checked her bank balance. Around 5 o'clock on Sunday, my phone rang. Hi, Donna. I said in as even a voice as I could. What the hell have you done? She almost shouted. Where the hell is Doris's car? I thought you were just pissed off and canceling credit cards trying to stop me from having a good time. You mean that piece of crap that was blocking access to my garage? I asked. I had it towed. I don't know how late they work on Sunday, but their card is on the kitchen table. You'll have to pay towing and impound fees to get your car back. I hope you set aside enough money from the party for that. Your little male ego is so wounded that you had to take it out on my sister? Donna bellowed. I could hear Doris screaming in the background, calling me all kinds of names. I told you we'd talk when I got home, and I'd tell you how it was going to be. You're going to pay for your little tantrum. You know the car will be repossessed with our money, not hers. First of all, your comment about my little male ego cost you dearly. I hate that, said I, seething with rage. Second, I'm not interested in listening to you dictate how things are going to be. You made it clear you were going to mess around, but you found a better man. So as far as I'm concerned, he can have you. Did you seriously think I was going to stay here to listen to you dictate how things were going to be? If you look around, I've moved a lot of personal belongings out of the house. I told you yesterday that I'm separating my life from yours. I'm just going to take my little wounded ego and leave you alone. So if you have something of substance to say, speak up or hang up. I heard her mutter, it wasn't supposed to be like this. In the background, I heard Doris say, tell that weakling to back off. He'll come crawling back soon. I hung up the phone. Surprisingly, I wasn't upset. I felt cold inside, completely frozen. I realized that I would probably mourn the death of my marriage later, but I didn't care now, but I definitely wanted revenge. I half expected her to call me back to curse me out after she looked at the house, but neither Donna nor Doris said a word until the end of the next day. I took the day off to talk to our corporate attorney, who quickly referred me to a divorce lawyer. I was given the usually unhappy news about what happens in a divorce. I would lose half of everything. Fortunately for me, my trust protected my business interests. Donna made about the same income as I did, so alimony wasn't an issue. We had some personal investments, but only about $20,000. We spent almost all of our extra income on sending June to school and bailing Doris out of her financial difficulties. Our main asset was the house, which I would have gladly sold or let Donna buy me out, which I knew she couldn't do without a large loan. We had no dependent children. Doris wasn't considered a dependent. I planned for Donna to be served the next day. Frankly, I thought I wouldn't hear a word from Donna until she was served, at which point it would be vengeful yelling. Around 4 in the afternoon, she called me. I'd like to talk, she suggested quietly. So talk, I told her. Not right now. I'm still at work. You can come home, and we can talk in private, she said. No, I replied laconically. You can close your office door and talk now, or call me back after you leave. But as for me driving to your house for 2 minutes of conversation or less, it's not worth the effort. What do you mean 2 minutes? Is that all our marriage is worth? She asked, perplexed and starting to get angry. No, he's worth a lot more than that, I replied. The time for a serious conversation was before you started being promiscuous. I heard her take a deep breath, but interrupted her. But I'm still willing to talk. I'd like to hear what you have to say, but I know your sister will show up now, start gagging, and I'll be out the door. Or she'll get stupid and try to block my car. That's going to lead to one of two things. 1. She'll get towed again. Or I'll smash her window to gain access and release the emergency switch so I can move her out of the way. Then I'll be arrested. She said she will make sure her sister stays away. Another thing that will shorten our conversation is that you'll start saying things I'm not interested in hearing. As soon as you do that, I'll leave. So no, it's not worth the gas or my time to drive home. Same goes for a restaurant or some public place. Call me back when you're in a position to talk. I hung up. I didn't have to wait 15 minutes for her to call me back. I kept an eye on my phone. Our phones were linked by the Find Your Phone app, so I knew she was still in her office. I wondered if she had spent the last few minutes mulling over her approach or consulting with her sister. I didn't care about either. Hi, I can talk now, she announced when I answered. So, a few ground rules, said I. Her surprised ground rules made me chuckle. Yeah, first off, I don't want you wasting my time explaining that this guy you cheated on me with is way more interesting than me. That would only make me angrier. He may have something more, but I don't care. You've never complained or suggested trying something more adventurous before. I'm not sure what that might be, though. We used to experiment with different things a lot. Don't tell me he complimented you and told you how beautiful you were. I did that. Besides, of course he was sucking up to you. That's what guys do when they want to get in your pants. I heard another sigh. Or perhaps a sigh that told me she was really going to say that. I also don't want you to start telling me that it was just sex and that you really love me. This time, I heard a whimper. I suspected I was destroying all of her arguments before she even made them. And I certainly don't want to hear you threaten that if I don't submit to your new world order, your new stallion will take care of you the way you deserve. That was Doris' blunt phrase before you left. If your boy was so rich, why did you need to use credit cards that morning or go to the ATM to get money? Just because that asshole can afford a room at the Marriott and drives a Corvette doesn't mean he's rich. I shuddered. I'd given myself away and shown that I knew too much. I wondered if she'd guessed. She remarked, "How do you know he drives a vet?" She asked. And Mari? I interrupted her by saying, and last, but certainly not least, don't tell me that this was your first and only instance of infidelity. The way he greeted both you and your sister shows that he knows you both well. It certainly wasn't your first time with him. I don't care if it was the second or 100th time. You've been following us? She exclaimed. I'm sure you didn't hire a private detective. You had no clue until Friday night. We were so careful. I almost laughed. She'd completely forgotten about that asshole's car. I didn't want it to come back to him. Not yet it didn't. So after hearing all these rules about what I do not want to hear, what do you say? She started crying. I let her cry and sipped my beer. Yes, I cold sit and drink beer while my marriage was falling apart. We've been together for 24 years, Donna exclaimed. Isn't that worth keeping? I tried hard not to laugh. It wasn't a happy or cheerful laugh at all. It was a laugh of disbelief. You apparently didn't think it was worth thinking about when you started cheating. She sighed again. I interrupted her. Tell me, did that asshole know you were married? I asked. She hummed. I think so. Well, I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah, he must have from what he said. He was giving me advice. What's the advice? I asked. He told me that if you get upset, I'll tell you how much the divorce will cost you. You'll lose half of everything you own, and you'll even have to pay me alimony. Donna said. This asshole is playing the power card, thought I. He said you wouldn't want anyone to know you were a cuckold, that no man wanted it known. He said I'd be in charge and could do whatever I wanted if I played my cards right. Doris told me the same thing. She believes him. According to her, some other women I know have made their husbands obey. They may have shaky marriages, but they don't divorce because it would cost too much. So he knew we were married and didn't care. And you definitely knew we were married, and apparently you didn't care either, I said. Now I'm going to ask you about it, and then you decide if you have anything to add. What do you think we're going to accomplish by talking right now? She started to cry. I want us to stay together. For us to stay married. You really can't get over your fragile male ego, can you? She wailed. Without a word, I hung up the phone. I mentally berated myself for reacting so quickly. There was something else I wanted to know. Did this asshole pick me? Did he know who I was? Orville Wendell Fontenot III, or Trey as he was known in the company, walked into Bob's office just after lunch the next day, Tuesday. Yes, Mr. Jacobs, you wanted to see me? He asked casually. He was surprised to see me sitting off to the side, but didn't react in any way. Obviously, he didn't realize who I was. I'm sure he knew my identity, but he didn't connect me to the bitch he'd been having fun with all weekend. Trey Fontenot was one of our liaisons and had been with the company for about a year. In some companies, he was known as an opinion leader. He was a salesman of sorts. His job was to make us look good in the press and smooth over any problems with our customers. Not really a salesman, He talked to our customers a lot. His job was easy. We had few, if any, public image problems. His boss dealt mostly with press releases about our developments and organized showings, and occasional tours of our facilities. Fontenot's main job was to promote our image. Sometimes he could coordinate with our clients to make sure everyone was on the same page in terms of publicity. I considered it a waste of effort and money. In my opinion, we should have only stood on our own. Now Bob agreed. At least he agreed that continuing to pay Fontenot's salary was a waste of money. Tell me, you weren't in the office on Friday, Bob said. What did you do? And how did you spend the weekend? Trey looked a little puzzled. I spent Friday with a man from Global Medical, Larry Atwell. He came down from New Orleans. We coordinated our publicity efforts, and the rest of the weekend I spent in the company of some ladies. Trey stuttered. May I ask why you're asking? Yes, I heard you were at the Marriott entertaining them. I assume Atwell was still with you. I hope it wasn't at the company's expense and those women weren't prostitutes, stated Bob. No, sir. We did meet with women to have a good time, but it was on a Friday night after our meeting. These women were not paid. Bob asked him what this good time was all about. Well, sir, it's none of your business as it doesn't involve the company, but I will tell you that it's a little hobby of mine to seduce willing women. I ask them out on dates, treat them to wine and dine, and then lure them into my bed for a little fun. These were two women I knew. Everything is completely consensual. How did that occur to you? Bob shook his head. Suffice it to say that's what happened. I want to hear the story. Sit down. Trey started to smirk, relaxing. He obviously thought he had no problems and was even a little proud of his conquests. Well, I'm single now. I got divorced 2 years ago because I like playing the field. I like to seduce women. I get to know them, buy them a drink, dance a little, and if I succeed, invite them to bed. I'm pretty good at it. And it's fun. Nobody gets hurt. The bastard was 32 years old and good-looking. I always thought he was a smarmy bastard. He seemed to have a smirk on his face all the time. Nobody? Asked Bob. How many of those ladies you meet are married? Don't they take care of their marriages? Trey's grin widened. Oh, you're wrong about that. Most of the women I go after are married. They're the best targets. It reduces the risk of constant involvement. We just entertain each other a little. They come in two types. It makes them feel alive, sexy, and maybe a little naughty. They do things for me that they say they've never done for their husbands or haven't done since they've been dating. Well, the husband doesn't know, of course. The second type is a little more complicated, but a lot of fun to work with. These are wives who want an upgrade. They want a better lover. Some of them want to improve their financial situation and actually want to leave their husband for a new guy with more money. I drive a red Corvette for a reason. That thing has an attraction. I even have a few different looks. I used to be Lance Sutherland. There's a lumber store in Shreveport by that name. I tell the women that I came here to buy lumber to process and sell to my company. Bob asked him if women really fall for that phrase. Trey laughed. Most don't even give it a second thought. In the bars, they know me as Lance. No last name. But I use a credit card in that name in case I'm addressed that way in a hotel or restaurant. I pay with the card, and the women don't pay attention to it. Lately, I've been Lance Parker, the oil man. I make up fake documents and leave them on my hotel room table. I let women see them and think they look important. Then I pick them up with my laptop and put them in my briefcase before the party. The broads have fun while their assholes sit at home waiting for them to come home. Some of the women even think I will take them away to a better life if their husbands leave them. I think even if the husbands find out, most of them forgive their wives after a while. At least no husband has come after me yet. I have a third group of wives who want to get their hubby men to be on guard. You know, obey their wife or lose half their shit. I give these wives all kinds of advice on what to do. They let the asshole know they're up to snuff and don't dare make waves. The funny thing is, the law and the courts are on the wife's side. The husband gets raked over the coals and the wife gets the cream. Like the old Jerry Reed song. She got the gold mine and I got the mine. Bob asked him how he meets women. I hang out at a couple clubs where women come to get picked up. It's easy. I'm known as a nice guy who can afford a room at the Marriott. I have a bit of a reputation. I try to behave appropriately. Some women do introduce me to others. Case in point is the woman from this weekend. They are very beautiful. They're a little over 40 and they're both totally hot. I got to know them. So when Larry came to town, I invited them to join us at the Marriott for the weekend. They gladly accepted. Women love to be lanced. His grin turned into a wide grin. How can you afford to go to the Marriott every weekend? Asked Bob. It must be expensive. That's the beauty of the plan. Trey grinned, almost glad he'd told the story. My cousin is the night manager. He'll block my room early and then, after midnight, change it in the computer to say it's unoccupied. I don't pay a dime. The cleaners come, see that the room needs to be cleaned, and they clean it. No one recognizes anything. This weekend I got a suite, 2 bedrooms, and a living room, all for free. The women thought I was rich. Larry and I entertained them, and they loved it, said Trey. He didn't see me clench my hands into fists. I wanted to get up and punch him so badly. They did all that, and you didn't have to pay them? Asked Bob, seemingly delighted. Did you use alcohol, or were they just whores? Larry and I used to use Viagra. But even then, after a while, you get tired and have to rest. Well, I have a couple concerns about that, as interesting as it is, said Bob. First of all, have you ever harassed any of the women at NSYNC? No, sir, Trey said. My dad taught me from an early age to never litter where I eat. I know we have strict rules of non-brotherhood. So you pick up women in the city. And when you go out of town, do you do anything like that? Asked Bob. I mean, you provide entertainment for Larry Atwell here. Does he reciprocate and do anything like that for you when you go out there? That leads me to ask if any of the other company reps we do business with do the same. I don't want this to backfire on us. Just Larry, Trey said. Global has an apartment for dignitaries, so we pick up women there and use the place. So you pick up women here and there? One more question. Would your expense account pass inspection if we took a close look? Asked Bob. Suddenly Orville Fontenot, aka Trey, aka Lance, became very nervous. Bob smiled and I saw him discreetly press a button on his desk. Now we're going to examine your expense records very carefully. And if we find that you're abusing the system, we're going to take one or both of the following actions. We'll prosecute you for theft or embezzlement, or whatever the lawyers call it. But either way, we will take the money out of your last paycheck. Last paycheck? Trey gritted his teeth. You're firing me? For what? For taking whores to a hotel? Yeah, you piece of shit. See, one of those whores you entertained this weekend, Donna, is my ex-wife, said I from my side of the room. And the other one is my sister-in-law. I was glad he hadn't guessed anything. He stared at me for a few brief moments before he muttered, "Oh shit." A couple security guards entered the room as Trey glanced at Bob and then at me. You can't fire me for entertaining your wife, he stated, regaining his footing. It was consensual. It's not my problem. I'll sue you both for wrongful termination. You should study the law. Louisiana is an at-will state. We can fire you for any reason and at any time, unless it's something protected by law, like discrimination. And this entertainment with your boss's wife certainly doesn't fall into that category. Now these two gentlemen will escort you to your office to gather your personal belongings. I would advise you to leave before any of the employees find out what a low-life piece of shit you are. Trey changed tactics. Fire me, and I'll tell everyone I entertained your wife. He grinned. Everyone will know they're total whores. Please do it, I begged. It will save me a lot of extra effort. Do you want to be called a cuckoo? He asked incredulously, pausing. I don't want anyone to think I'm being unfair to my wife when I divorce her, replied I. As he was being escorted out, he started yelling loudly that he was being fired for entertaining Jacob's wife. What do you say we leave early, little brother? Said Bob with a grin. I feel like having a beer or 3. We've got another episode in a couple hours that we need to get ready for. I agreed. I was shaking from the adrenaline rush, but I let Bob lead me out the door. I knew his secretary and the security guys had overheard the entire conversation. Considering that and Trey's rant, everyone in the company would know by the end of the day. It didn't bother me one bit. You know Trey was yelling about entertaining Jacob's wife. He didn't say which Jacob's. I laughed. Evelyn will be pissed if people think it was her, Bob groaned. Now I really need a beer, he said. Trey better get out of town. We laughed as we walked away. Bob and I were sitting in his living room, sipping beers at 5 o'clock when my phone rang. Showtime, I said. Sitting with us were my daughter, June, and a young police officer named Gary. They seemed to enjoy each other's company and sat side by side on the couch. I realized they were spending quite a bit of time together when Bob's wife, Evelyn, invited June over for Sunday dinner, and she declined, saying she had a date with a man she had just met. She was too busy to meet with me the previous evening as well. I wasn't the least bit surprised when he accompanied her this afternoon and, frankly, fully approved. You miserable piece of shit, came Donna's voice through the speaker of my phone. Do you have any idea how humiliated I've been? Do you have any idea what you could have cost me a promotion and even my job? How could you do that? After all our years together? I hope you don't lose your job, I replied, trying to keep a straight face. I'd hate to have to pay alimony to my unemployed ex-wife. But I don't care at all if your promotion is jeopardized. You may have earned it. To be honest, I timed your pitch to coincide with the start of the school board meeting, and I can tell you were deeply humiliated. But why would I do that after our years together? Remember how you mocked me by saying that your whoring and cheating on me hurt my fragile male ego? You even repeated that phrase when we talked yesterday. Well, I hope your fragile female ego took a hit. In the video I saw, it looked exactly like that. Video? She shouted. Of course. My lawyer said I shouldn't be present, so I sent someone to record it. I said, speaking of video, I'm going to send you a videotape of Orville Wendell Fontenot 3, or should I say 30, detailing the fact that you and Doris were his whores all weekend. Oh, I forgot. You don't know him by that name, but he did tell Bob and I how he entertained you last weekend. Sounds like he works, or rather used to work at East Sink, and makes a hobby out of seducing married whores at local pickup centers. Now I would advise you to get an attorney quickly so you can sign and return the divorce papers. I'd hate to send copies of these videos to everyone. Like your parents. They're old. I like them, but there's a limit to how much I won't spare them. I don't want them to think I'm the bad guy in our divorce. You and Doris should make sure of that. Yes, it's part of my nondescript male ego, but I won't be the villain here. I was very honest in the terms I offered. An equal split with no alimony. When you sell the house, you can continue to help your sister financially, at least for a while, until you run out of money. I would suggest you move in together, and you will manage the money. I know she gave you bad advice and introduced you to Orville, or Lance as he wants to be called, but you two can still work things out. If you keep your ugly selfishness out of the way. I heard her cry as we passed out. I looked around the room and shrugged. In the video, it took her a while to stop crying after being served. I wonder how long it will take her now. I'll never know. I had already seen the videotape of her being served before I called Donna. She had just finished a meeting with the school board. They were discussing her promotion in the school board system. The videotape showed her coming out smiling, followed by several board members. I suspected it had gone very well in her favor. That expression was replaced by an expression of confusion when a young paperwork clerk approached her and asked if she was Donna Jacobs. When she confirmed that she was handed an envelope and announced that she had received a subpoena. But because she repeated one stupid phrase, I couldn't get over her cheating and needing extra male companionship because of my fragile male ego. I went one step further. A man dressed like an old-time town crier shouted across the foyer and announced in a loud voice, Listen up. Donna Jacobs, now known as the cheating whore, has been sentenced. Immediately, two young women standing close to him began to yak on their gazulkas. At first, I thought they were just going to trumpet it, but they started playing a tune that sounded like a wedding song. Here Comes the Bride. Then all three of them started singing. Here Comes the Whore. Her marriage is over. They turned and walked out of the auditorium, playing the tune on their gazulkas. The video ended with Donna collapsing to her knees and bursting into tears. No one paid attention to the young police officer who stood off to the side with a cell phone recording what was happening. Daddy, Gary recorded this for you. But please don't send it, my daughter June pleaded. I begged him not to record it, but he said he promised. He said his word was his bond. I told her that the only person who could see the video from now on would be her mother, unless she fought for a divorce. And Donna, of course, would get a copy of the videotaped interview with Fontenot on her way out. Epilogue: Donna did not resist the divorce. Her attorney told her that my terms were reasonable and in compliance with current divorce law. As expected, she begged to go to counseling to save our marriage. I knew from her angry look when she opened her mouth to say I couldn't get over her actions and forgive her after 20+ years of marriage that she was going to mention my fragile male ego again. Say it. Say fragile male ego once. If I ever hear you or your sister say that phrase, I'm going to send out all the videotapes. Especially to your parents, said I. She stopped talking and stared at me, crying. She hated having to sell the house we owned. It wasn't good enough for her until she was forced to sell it. It was a palace then. I really hoped she wouldn't give too much of the proceeds to pay her sister's bills. June said she would step in and try to prevent that from happening. I didn't care. Orville, aka Trey, aka Lance, had a hard time finding a job even remotely similar to the one he held with us. Perhaps a theft charge due to misuse of an expense account had worsened his chances for the future. Or maybe it was the laughter he heard from the human resources representatives of any potential company when they called to check his employment history. Few of them asked for follow-up explanations. Trey's legal troubles were compounded when the Marriott Hotel Corporation filed charges against him and his cousin for theft of services. I didn't even know it happened, but a night manager has no right to provide rooms, especially for sexual favors. The corporation publicized the situation to make an example of their employees across the country. I heard that the charges were eventually dropped, but only after Orville and his cousin went broke trying to pay a $1,300 an hour lawyer. Global Medical quickly fired and replaced Larry Atwell, a friend of Trey's. He joined Trey in the ranks of the unemployed. I guess someone is keeping an eye on his future career, just like someone here at home is keeping an eye on Trey's career. Of course, I had lost too. My marriage of 24 years was over. It would take me a while to regain my trust in women, but I'd met a few who assured me I could get back in the saddle without much effort. They would help me. They were there to convince me I was wrong to judge women by the two in my family. On the other hand, I no longer had to face a cheating wife and a parasitic daughter-in-law. The only people left to gain in this whole affair are my daughter June and future son-in-law Gary, a former police officer and my current protege. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel